Now, a briefing on aviation security legislation. The chairman and ranking member on the Senate Commerce Aviation Subcommittee answered reporters' questions today. Senators Jay Rockefeller and Kay Bailey Hutchison spoke for about 25 minutes.
I know. I just go ahead and put them in. Have to get down some noodles. There's been some speculation and talk and concern, understandable, that we hope very much to pass an airline aviation financial viability bill, hopefully today. Insurance shuts down on Monday. If that happens, nothing moves on Monday. So it has to be done. People quite naturally have raised to Senator Hutchins and myself and others, why are you doing a airplane financial bill and not doing a security bill? And there are a variety of answers to that. Number one is that the security aspect is highly active and underway, being negotiated. Some of it can be done by the administration, some of it can be done by legislation. There is a complete commitment in our caucus, and I would assume in your caucus, that very early next week that security bill will come to fruition. For example, the federal air marshals, which Kay Bailey Hutchins has been very much interested in, as we all have the doors, which will take longer. And most importantly and most immediately, the federalization of the folks that do the radar. That does take congressional legislation. And it's not a question of is that going to happen, it's just a question that we need to get the bailout bill or the financial viability bill done this afternoon so that they can operate on Monday. And if there are no airplanes, then safety obviously becomes less relevant. If there are airplanes, safety is tremendously relevant because that's the way you get people back onto airplanes. But that is going to happen. There's bipartisan agreement on that. There's bipartisan agreement that will be taken up very, very quickly. There is no intent to say that there's a priority here or a priority there, but there is an intent to say that the insurance industry is saying no more insurance as of Monday, and therefore no more flights. That is cannot stand, so to speak, in America, and therefore the need for doing this in a series of stages. I'll conclude my remarks by saying people tend, I think, in situations like this to think that that everything is being done at once. The last of the truth in this situation. We're dealing basically with a entirely post-September 11th situation in terms of airline aviation financial capacity. And that is all. There's nothing more. There's nothing to address prior to September 11th financial insecurities or problems. But we do have to make sure that since they were government shut down for a period of days, lost a great deal of money, and since their situation is highly precarious because of the insurance decision, that we get this done to restore confidence, that airplanes will be flying. The security part, I think there's very broad agreement on. And if I were you, I would listen to people who are speaking tomorrow in Saturday talks, because I think that subject will relate greatly, if not exclusively, about the business of aviation security and the Americans' people's confidence, therefore, to get back on airplanes.
Yes, I just want to say that Senator Rockefeller and I have been working on the security issues really all through last week. talking to all of the airline CEOs in a conference call. We've been talking to airports, talking to the people in the Attorney General's office, and I am very pleased that the President, through the Attorney General, acted so swiftly to begin shoring up our aviation security immediately. Sky marshals are now on some airplanes detailed from other law enforcement agencies, and I think the temporary measures are being expanded as we speak. What Senator Rockefeller and I are working on in the Commerce Committee is the security package that it already is in a draft form, and I think we are very close to a consensus, which would have the federal role expanded in aviation security. First, in the screeners, where that's the front line at the airports. We want to assure that there is better training and a better experience level at these screening machines. And then secondly, of course, we're talking about sky marshals, which I think should be a permanent force that would be pervasive in our airline community. The finance package, as has been said, is going through first because there are some deadlines, and we want to shore up our airline community to make sure that we have our system of commerce in place. Airlines, of course, have such an important part in our economy, and we want to stabilize our economy, and we want to try to begin the process of bringing the confidence of the public back to flying. We believe the most important component of the confidence of the American public is security, and that's why it is our first priority, and we are working on the bill. We got through all day of hearings yesterday to determine what should be the main components of that security measure, and now we are in the process of putting forth a bill that I think will be on the Senate floor either next week or at the very latest the week following. Thank you.
Senators, maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong. Is there a provision in this airline bailout package that will allow CEOs to still maintain their very large salaries?
That is there. During the course of the hearing, that subject obviously came forward very sharply, and there, on the part of both of those who spoke on behalf of the airline industry, one of them said, yes, we are in the process of actually cutting back our salaries. And the other said that a lot, it's salaries, it's options, and it's bonuses. Obviously, the options and the bonuses disappeared with 50% of the value of most of the airlines. And I think that that individual also indicated that they would be looking very carefully at that. I think it's absolutely inevitable, my own view, Senator Hutchinson, it's inevitable that if there is ever an industry that will be under scrutiny by the Congress over the next several years as we work our way through this, it's going to be the airline industry, and that will be part of it. There was an enormous discrepancy in the range of salaries, but the salaries cannot be used as a substitute or as an irritant to delay the action necessary to make sure that planes are flying on Monday.
Should you put caps on the CEO salaries?
The House, I think, is probably entirely and totally unwilling to do that, and I'm not sure that therefore that'll be a factor. But my own view is that the airline executives would serve themselves very poorly by not dealing with this problem, and I think they will. And as they indicated, already are.
Let me just say that I think that everything that Senator Rockefeller said about the scrutiny and the confidence that Congress is not going to allow anyone who is taking federal money to get out of line is absolutely true. I also think at a minimum that there would be some kind of cap, at least not the ability to add to a salary at this point.
Yes, and that I should explain, that I think can be and will be in the Senate bill, and it'll probably be acceptable to the House. The question is, can it be reduced? Because the problem was, you get very high, can it be reduced? And I think that's where you run into problems in the House.
Can you explain where the bill is right now? We understand there's some last-minute hang-ups, perhaps on liability provisions, and particularly Senator Hutchinson. Is there a problem coming either from Continental or American with some of the indemnity provisions? And also, if you could address why there apparently is not going to be anything in this bill for laid-off workers, extended benefits, or health care.
Well, obviously, this has all come up very quickly, and there has been a lot of negotiation on the finance part of this package. There was a major disagreement about whether the liability portions even should be addressed in this package, and I think some of the disagreements on what the liability should be are causing some of the hang-ups in the package right now. But nevertheless, there has been an attempt to address liability going forward, because we are in a war-like situation now. And then there is the retroactive issue of taking care of victims' families in a way that is responsible and in a way that allows the airlines basically to go to the limits of their insurance, after which the federal government would be responsible for added losses. I would say that is still in flux.
As for the second part of the question, Senator Kennedy, Senator Carnahan, and a number of us, I'm sure on both sides of the aisle, are working very, very strongly in that. We're already looking now at potentially well over 100,000 people, and I think there is no doubt that is, as I indicated earlier, this is the first step. We've got to get ourselves to Monday. We've got to make airlines basically catch up for being federally grounded last week, and then I think this will be an ongoing scenario of scrutiny, of bills, of which that will certainly be one.
And I think there could be a bill passed today and then a supplemental bill on the same subject that deals with many of these other issues. But one of the things we're trying to do is minimize the layoffs by giving the support to the airlines and letting them know that there will be a line of credit available based on need and other factors that will hopefully have an impact of not requiring these massive layoffs that we're already hearing about.
On September 11th, knives or box cutters were smuggled onto 4 planes. What in the changes that you're proposing, I guess whether it be screening or whatever, would give people confidence that that wouldn't happen again, or can you have confidence that wouldn't happen again in the changes you're talking about?
All of that, I think, is currently being worked out, and rather than try to answer specifically, that is being worked out now by experts. And I think it has a lot to do, for example, with the federalization of the people behind the screens, and that's not just the matter of people who check your baggage as you take it on board, but also the baggage which is checked into the cargo, which is on about a 50% basis randomly checked. It involves the same people, the lowest contract. I mean, the days of contracting that out, paid for by airlines that really don't have any money anymore, and by airports that don't have any money anymore, it just doesn't make any sense. It needs to be federalized, very, very clearly. Another thing I want to say is that one of the reasons I think that both Senator Hutchinson and I want to see this done today, if possible, is that there are an enormous number of people, rental cars, hotels, motels, and others coming in saying, well, wait a second, we're collateral damage on this, and we also deserve to be a part of this. And I think what we would both say is that if you want to get rental cars and tourism and all aspects of that back on track, you do 2 things. One is you make sure that there are airplanes to fly people to where those people have their services available, and secondly, you want to make sure that people have the confidence to get on those airplanes, which is what safety is all about. So in a sense, if we do what we want to do, a lot of those other problems will begin to solve themselves if the American people are able to, and that's something none of us know for sure, are able to get themselves back to a position of, as the President said last night, you have work to do it, and do it hard.
I just wanted to ask you, answer one other part of that question. Obviously, everyone has stories of things getting through the scanning machines, and we're trying to close that down by putting federal people in. And even today, there are law enforcement monitors at many of our major airports that are looking at those screeners. For instance, when I came through the DFW airport yesterday, there were Border Patrol and Customs agents at every screening machine monitoring that screening. So, and I'm hearing that that is being done in other airports as well. But there's one other major difference, and that is that those box cutters were legal before, and they are not legal today. The Secretary of Transportation immediately shut off any scissors or any knives of any length, so that today you cannot go through legally with any kind of knife or pair of scissors, no matter how small.
So it wasn't just a problem of
It was, that's right.
inattentiveness,
I think we could well find, and we don't know for sure, but I think we could well find that these people didn't violate any regulation, that they went through with legal weapons.
Are there going to be any provisions in the airline bill for management responsibility? It was suggested in the hearing yesterday that some of the larger airlines, if they're going to shut down routes, that maybe they should sell some of their slots to smaller airlines such as JetBlue or Southwest that may be able to expand in this time when larger airlines will be cutting off service to smaller communities.
We both have rural airports. I just have only rural airports. The answer to that is yes. And there are a variety of suggestions of that, one of which is that without relaxing the antitrust laws, which the airlines do not want to, and the ATA, therefore all the airlines, that is not their position nor their desire, that you, through the auspices, let's say, of the Department of Transportation or the Department of Justice, my preference would be the Department of Transportation, would look at various rural airports and say, all right, now, we don't have a load factor here, which is quite sufficient, but on the other hand, it's beginning to come up. We can't both service this. We can't compete there, but we have to stay there. One of us has to stay there, so that the airlines working under the auspices of DOT together, not in collusion, but in cooperation under DOT, make the decision about who will cover what kinds of airports, so that as much as is possible, provided the American people regain their confidence in airlines, and I think here it's very important for both of us to say, as has been said very often before, that there is not anything even anywhere close to the safety of traveling in this country as there is traveling on an airline, and that remains the case today. Now, how do you get the American people to believe that? I think that will come. You can take the dark scenario and say, well, Alaska Airlines had a crash a number of years ago and it took them 1.5 to 2 years to get their load factor back. I don't think that's going to be the case here, because American commerce depends upon aviation. I think people are going to come back with it, particularly as we do our safety work, which I think American people are really looking for.
What are you doing in this package for the laid off workers? Anything?
As I indicated, not in this package. And the reason for that is there's an enormous desire to get this first part done. And that is so that airlines can operate on Monday when insurance cuts off. They can't operate without insurance. And secondly, as I've said, this is the first of a variety of approaches that we have to take to the airline situation. Safety being one, the whole question of I think it's a very fair point that is made that we're dealing with airline figures. Those have to be scrubbed by this new management team, coordinating team. David Walker, GAO, is on that. He testified for us yesterday, and he was absolutely superb. You want the figures scrubbed because you don't want them just to be the airline figures. You want them scrubbed by people who can do it very objectively. That also will increase the confidence that taxpayer money is being spent wisely. But the worker protection part, or worker helping part, will absolutely be legislation. It will just not be legislation today.
Do you think Reagan National can be open without endangering the national security?
Well, right now, it's the Secret Service that is keeping Reagan National closed. And I think that there is a desire to reopen Reagan National when all of the terrorist threats that could still be out there are considered not to be a threat, and when the airport can put in place some traffic patterns that would eliminate the proximity of our key government installations from the glide path. And I think that will be possible, but I think that all of that has to be worked out. So I'm not saying that that's going to happen in a few weeks, but I do think that there can be safe procedures, and once all of the security issues are put to rest, that there is a chance that Reagan will be reopened.
You say not in a few weeks, so you think we're talking months here?
Well, I'm not putting a timetable on it. I'm just saying that there are several things that have to be done, and several different agencies that are going to have to sign off before Reagan National would be reopened.
The senator's on a tight schedule. One more question, please.
Could I follow up on that about Reagan National? Given that U.S. Airways accounts for almost half the traffic there, do you think there ought to be any special help for them, given their precarious financial situation and the fact that with it closed, they've lost sort of the crown jewel of their system?
Well, let me just say that there will be a formula from which these companies will be eligible for the federal money, and part of the formula is going to relate to what your actual losses are based on the last quarter of operations. So there will be a factor there in all of the federal aid that relates to your actual losses.
And I would add to that, it's very, very important to remember that when airlines had tremendous cash flow problems prior to last Tuesday, none of that is in any of the bills, none of that is considered, none of that is part of anything that we're discussing. It's only September 11th and afterwards. If an airline, for example, that has a tremendous volume at Reagan, or other airlines in other places, if they are financially strongly threatened, you have to remember that they have to have the liquidity to go into Chapter 11 in order to restructure. And so it's very possible that airlines would choose to go into Chapter 11 much earlier than any of us might expect. And I don't think anybody's particularly thinking about that right now. There are some very healthy airlines, but most of them aren't. And so the whole question of going into Chapter 11 so you can restructure so as not to go to Chapter 7 becomes actually a very important financial consideration here, as with Reagan.
Senators, do either of you have any concern about the process where the leaders and the White House are making so many decisions sort of out of public view? I'm thinking of the doubling of the $40 billion for the first package. Paul O'Neill yesterday was telling the banking committee that it makes no sense to have loan guarantees for airlines, and then it turns up in the bill. Is this process worrisome at all?
Not to me, it isn't.
No, I just think we have to react to the crisis in which we find ourselves. And I think there are going to be safeguards, and I'm very pleased that so many people have put safeguards on the table. I think there will be safeguards for both the financial package based on real losses and on the administrative requirements that will be in any kind of a loan guarantee. This is not going to be a blank check. I think there are a lot of steps that are very positive steps are going to be put in the way, but then when all is said and done, we're doing this fast. We know that this is not the normal way we would legislate. We would be having hearings. These would go through committees, which I think is healthy, but this is not business as usual. And I think we have to be a part of a team, and we are so bipartisan on this and so unified that I think if we have made some mistakes or if we have left something out that needs to be addressed, we're going to address it. And the team spirit that we have in Congress working with the President, I think, is going to allow all of these things to be worked out on an amicable basis.
And remembering the insurance industry on Monday
Can you just explain
tends to
that
act
a
as a
little bit?
discipline.
Because my understanding was that if they canceled contracts, it's basically kicked off a 7-day thing, and it's basically meant they renegotiated at a higher price. What is your understanding of
Well,
that?
my understanding is incomplete on that, except that that's what we were told very clearly this morning. FAA requires that, for example, you have war risk. That's not going to be available, and under FAA, I'm not sure that you can even fly unless you have that kind of insurance. So it's a very complicated matter. All of the airlines, I think, have already received letters saying that basically what I've said. This is not speculation.
Thank you.
Is that ATA?
No, it came very, very